Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Andlinger Center for Energy and the Environment 2020 annual meeting. I am Vivian Furman. I'm the Assistant Director for External Partnerships at the Andlinger Center, and I'll be your host today, guiding you through our really exciting agenda. So now, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Jason Wren, the Acting Director and Associate Director for Research of the Andlinger Center for Energy and the Environment. He is also Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering and the Andlinger Center for Energy and the Environment here at Princeton University. I hand it off to you, Jason.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Andlinger Center for Energy and the Environment at Princeton University. Sorry we cannot bring you to this beautiful building behind me this year, but I'm very glad we actually have many more of you who can join us today virtually. And I believe you will have a great few hours ahead. The Andlinger Center sits at a very unique intersection of Princeton University. It brings together faculty and researchers from across campus to address today's pressing energy and environmental challenges. A chief goal of the center is to translate fundamental research into practical solutions. The center strives to unite stakeholders from academic, corporate, public sector, and nonprofit in the pursuit of pragmatic energy and environmental research to address the grand challenges we face today and in the future. This annual meeting brings together all these stakeholders to share knowledge, network, and establish relationships that will allow us to work together and achieve what we could not do alone. Develop scalable and actionable solutions for a renewable and sustainable energy future. The Andlinger Center annual meeting is generously sponsored by Princeton Affiliates Partnership. Affiliates corporate memberships collaborate with academic experts and with each other to pursue transformative innovations. This engagement promotes technology transfer between Princeton and our partners to address global energy needs and environmental concerns. Before we get to the intriguing discussions ahead, I do want to thank our affiliate members for their support and attendance today, especially our charter member ExxonMobil, our general members PSEG, American Tower, and our newest member Community Energy. We also want to thank our affiliate members, Power Survey Company, NRG, Siemens, American Water, and Avedon. Thank you all. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Andrea J. Goldsmith, Dean of Engineering and Applied Science, and the Arthur LaGrant Doherty Professor of Electrical Engineering at Princeton University. She was previously the Stephen Harris Professor of Engineering and Professor of Electrical Engineering at Stanford University, where she is now Harris Professor Emerita. Dean Goldsmith is a member of the National Academy of Engineering and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a fellow of the IEEE and of Stanford, and has received numerous awards, including the McCorney Prize, the IEEE Summer Technical Field Award, and the Silicon Valley San Jose Business Journal's Woman of Influence Award. She's also the founding chair of the IEEE Boards of Directors Committee on Diversity, Inclusion, and Ethics. Dean Goldsmith is a leader in the fields of information theory and communications, with a focus on creating innovations in wireless communications, cyber physical systems, and neuroscience. She authored a popular textbook called Wireless Communications and 2 other books, and she has published more than 150 journal articles and 350 conference papers. In addition to her outstanding academic achievements, she also co-authored 29 patents and has been a very successful entrepreneur. She founded and served as the CTO of Plume Wi-Fi and of Quantenna Inc., and she serves on the board of directors of several other companies as well. It's a great honor to welcome Dean Goldsmith to Princeton. and we are very pleased to have her joining us for the Andlinger Center's annual meeting. With that, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to Dean Goldsmith.
Thank you so much, Jason, for that incredibly kind introduction. And I'm truly thrilled to be Princeton's new Dean of Engineering and Applied Science. And I'm also truly thrilled to be introducing our keynote speaker today, the Honorable Elizabeth Sherwood-Randall. We are exceptionally fortunate to have Liz as a member of Andlinger Center's External Advisory Council. And we're also incredibly lucky to have her as a plenary speaker for this event so that we can benefit from her great wisdom, experience, and vision in helping the Andlinger Center to maximize its impact. Now, introducing Liz is not only a pleasure, but it's also a bit daunting, given her illustrious career spanning academia, industry, and government. She is truly a national treasure and a force of nature in her tremendous impact to date, spanning technology, policy, and education to keep us safe as a country and to ensure that our energy resources are available, which is incredibly important, especially now under the pandemic, where everything is online. Throughout her career in public service and leading universities and research institutions, Liz has engaged the toughest global challenges, including reducing nuclear dangers and coordinating energy, environment, and security initiatives with national governments around the globe. She is currently the Distinguished Professor of the Practice at Georgia Institute of Technology's Nunn School of International Affairs and a Senior Fellow at its Strategic Energy Institute. In addition, currently, she's Senior Fellow at the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, and she advises several U.S. national laboratories, energy investment funds, and research organizations, as well as cybersecurity startups. During the Obama administration's second term, Liz served as the Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Energy. She was effectively the department's chief operating officer, executing leadership and management responsibilities for the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration and its 17 national laboratories. And really in this role, she was critical to addressing the growing natural, physical, and cybersecurity threats to our critical infrastructure in energy. She developed and implemented a new strategy to meet these tremendous threats in terms of increasing grid resilience and emergency response. In addition to ensuring that our grid was secure, she advanced the frontiers of research and innovation in science and energy, fulfilling environmental management commitments and building a more secure and resilient US power grid. And I think this is an incredible example of how research and innovation can come together with government to ensure that the technology we need to keep us safe is available. Prior to her tenure at the Department of Energy, Liz served as Special Assistant to the President and White House Coordinator for Defense Policy, countering weapons of mass destruction and arms control under President Obama. In the first term of President Obama, she was Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for European Affairs on the White House National Security Council. In this role, she guided the interagency policy process on US relations with 49 European countries. Prior to her term in the Obama government, she was founding principal of the Stanford-Harvard Preventive Defense Project at the Kennedy School. She also served in the Clinton administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. And she, prior to the Clinton years, was the co-founder and associate director of Strengthening Democratic Institutions Project at Harvard's Belfer Center. And finally, earlier in her career, before that, she was Chief Foreign Affairs and Defense Policy Advisor to Senator Joseph Biden. So you can see why I characterize Liz as a national treasure. She's been so instrumental in keeping our country safe and keeping our energy grid secure. And with that, I would like to call Liz to give us her overview in her keynote speech, following which we will do a question and answer. So Liz, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this keynote. Thank you so much for all you have done for our country.
Wow, good morning. It's an honor to be your keynote speaker today, and I'm blown away by your exuberantly generous introduction. Dean Goldsmith, your experiences as a scholar and as a practitioner, as an inventor and as an entrepreneur bring so many strengths to the already rich Princeton ecosystem in which Andlinger is fortunately situated. And I look forward to working with you and to the conversation that will follow my remarks this morning. As Dean Goldsmith noted, while serving as the Deputy Secretary of the Energy Department, I have had the opportunity to participate in activities at Princeton, including oversight of the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab and the opening of the beautiful building that Andlinger occupies when I came to Princeton in 2016. Although we can't be together in person as we were then, I'm very much with you in spirit today. And I'll just add that I am not the only member of my family to be spending virtual time in New Jersey today. Our younger son, William, is a Princeton senior who's majoring in neuroscience, and he is zooming in for classes from a California beach town, where he is living with a pod of tigers. They study until the sun goes down on the East Coast, and then, rather than hitting the Dillon Gym, they're hitting the waves and teaching themselves to surf. The Andlinger Center has grown quite significantly since I last spoke at the meeting of the opening of the center 4 years ago. Its innovative and wide-ranging research, excellent teaching and mentoring, and interdisciplinary programs have positioned Princeton as a leader in energy and environmental science. These achievements should come as no surprise. New Jersey has a long history of forward-looking green thinking. In 1953, at the famous Bell Labs, researchers demonstrated the first photovoltaic effect, paving the way for the modern solar industry. And the Princeton Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Lab developed the first climate model in the 1960s, catalyzing the field of climate science. And of course, as I've mentioned, DOE's Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory is located on your campus and continues to pursue nuclear fusion as an energy source. My friend, Governor Phil Murphy, spoke at this event 2 years ago. And thanks to his strong leadership, New Jersey continues to pace the nation in advancing climate and clean energy policies. New Jersey has pledged to run on 100% clean energy by 2050. It has redoubled its investment in offshore wind and enacted historic legislation to ensure economically marginalized communities have access to clean air and water. New Jersey was also the first state in the country to require that its schools teach climate change as part of the curriculum. New Jersey's leadership is commendable and critical, but we have to be honest that cities and states cannot solve the climate challenge alone. We urgently need strong federal leadership in the form of a comprehensive plan that fully integrates our clean energy, climate, economic, and national security goals. Today, I want to talk with you about what the US must do to secure a sustainable energy transition. In particular, I will offer some thoughts as to what the next administration should do to confront the climate crisis, which, if we do not make immediate and sustainable changes, will disrupt every aspect of our lives in the coming decades. I'll begin by suggesting some principles to guide our thinking about the nationwide campaign that we must launch and lead to meet this moment. First, and this will be music to your ears at the Andlinger Center, everything we must do must be science-based. Second, We need to develop as many tools as we can that contribute to radically reducing carbon emissions so that we are able to meet our net zero goals by mid-century. The government should not be in the business of picking technology favorites. Instead, it should generate optionality by strategically seeding possibilities and investing where the market isn't yet ready to invest, but where there is early evidence that new technologies may meet defined needs. Of course, the needs of different cities and states and regions and countries will be varied, and so the planet will need the largest and most capable toolbox that we can field to meet those needs. Third, we need to move fast because climate change won't wait. Fourth, we need to deliberately integrate energy security into everything that we do for ourselves and for our allies and partners. This means, among other things, securing reliable access to critical clean energy sources and supplies, and securing our energy infrastructure against pernicious threats. Fifth, we must also deliberately integrate social equity, inclusive opportunity, and climate justice into everything that we do. In particular, we should focus on what we can do to soften the impacts of climate change and the clean energy transition on those who will be most directly affected. So based on these principles, the key pillars of a national strategy to deal with our intertwined energy, climate, and security challenges include 4 major lines of effort: improving energy efficiency, investing in innovation to grow jobs and enable a low-carbon future, modernizing our power grid for the full spectrum of challenges it must meet, and strengthening our domestic and international partnerships. In some ways, energy efficiency represents the easiest thing we can do on our path to decarbonization. For instance, we should immediately reinstate the standards established in the Obama administration for vehicle fuel economy, light bulbs, and other consumer goods. Those requirements were changing our energy profile at home, and they were ensuring that our companies could compete effectively in the international markets that increasingly demand more efficient products. Looking ahead, there are a number of especially promising avenues for improving energy efficiency and reducing emissions. For example, Andlinger's Lin Lu, who is currently on sabbatical from Princeton, has developed a smart technology to retrofit existing windows with a sunlight controlling outer layer. It can improve a building's overall energy efficiency and lower electricity costs by up to 40%. I understand that there's currently a plan to deploy this technology in New York City starting as early as next year. Other lines of effort across the nation include deploying demand response mechanisms in the electricity, transportation, and building sectors, further increasing vehicle fuel efficiency, developing more efficient end-use technologies, and utilizing new technologies such as smart systems to reduce energy consumption. And this brings me to a crucial point. Investments in clean energy innovation support economic opportunity and strengthen the global competitiveness of American goods and services. Deployment of new energy technologies has driven job growth in the US energy sector over the last decade at a pace that is double the national average. Overall, there's huge potential for good-paying clean energy jobs in this country, many of which will not require a college degree. Instead, they can be accessed through training provided by partnerships between employers and community colleges, supported where necessary by federal funding. To generate these jobs, we need to launch a full-scale assault on reaching a deeply decarbonized economy. According to an International Energy Agency assessment released in June, 40 out of the 46 critical technologies needed to realize the global clean energy transition aren't on track to meet our goals. We must invest in the cross-cutting platforms that support this innovation, including advanced computing capabilities and carbon capture and storage. A superb report published just this month by the Energy Futures Initiative in partnership with the Precourt Institute for Energy and the Center for Carbon Storage at Stanford argues that innovation in carbon capture and storage will be one of the key enablers of decarbonization. In the short term, CCS could help rapidly decarbonize several of the highest emitting sectors and industries, including petroleum refining and ethanol production. In the long term, as part of a systematic effort to build a suite of decarbonization capabilities, CCS will complement other strategies and enable the emergence of new clean energy industries, such as clean hydrogen. But we need sound policy, strategic planning, and investments in science and innovation to develop the necessary technologies. Fortunately, much of that research infrastructure is already in place in our country. When I served at DOE, it was exhilarating to visit our 17 national laboratories, including the one at Princeton, which are the jewels in the crown of our innovation ecosystem, and to experience firsthand the magic that they make possible. Federal investment in our labs and in our great research universities has the power to germinate and launch new solutions across multiple interconnected energy, climate, and security challenges. We'll need to invest in our people too. We don't have enough students in the STEM pipeline right now. If we are going to meet our global climate challenges and develop the clean energy technologies of tomorrow that will drive jobs and growth in our economy, we must inspire more young people, and especially more women and people of color, to become involved in innovating and working in the clean energy field. We know that diverse groups represent a wider range of perspectives, backgrounds, and ideas, and can help us generate new solutions and reach better decisions. We also know that climate effects often disproportionately impact underserved communities. So we have an added responsibility to identify opportunities to engage members of those communities in developing the solutions that will meet their needs. Therefore, a stark reality, even in a COVID-constrained fiscal environment, is that we absolutely must ramp up federal funding for clean energy innovation and where needed for education and training. Strategically invested, this infusion will be an engine of our economy and will position us to lead the world again. Included in this broad campaign must be accelerated work to upgrade our aging electricity grid. This month, across California, hundreds of thousands of residents and businesses experienced evacuations and deliberate rotating blackouts because of the compounding risks associated with extreme weather events and the vulnerability of our electricity infrastructure. It's urgent that we do all that we can to reduce the frequency and severity of these threats and ultimately build a cleaner, more capable, more secure, and more resilient grid for the 21st century, because California is just the leading edge of what will affect our entire nation. In contrast, Princeton's microgrid is a solid example of the value of a flexible, varied, and layered energy infrastructure. In the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy in 2012, when millions of people were without electricity, it ensured that the campus still had power and first responders and local residents had a place to get warm and recharge their devices. So we must first modernize our infrastructure. This involves a range of efforts, including expanding our investments in battery storage to ensure the grid can meet peak demand loads as we transition to intermittent sources like solar and wind. It also means deliberately investing in large-scale grid modernization initiatives, such as platform technologies to more effectively manage the grid and smart metering networks to improve transmission efficiency and distribution management. Second, we need to face the reality that the segmented national grid we have inherited is not the future grid that we need. Scientists in the DOE lab system have determined that working toward the establishment of an integrated national grid could enable us to better manage the sort of heat wave-induced blackouts that Californians have recently endured. An expanded grid would enable California to send its excess solar power east during the day, and for large Midwestern wind farms to send power westward at night, aligning supplies with demand. Not only would a supergrid promote renewables and increase grid reliability, it would also lower prices for consumers through increased competition among power companies. This research has not been brought forward for action in the last few years, and that is to our detriment. Its conclusion should be recognized, and a long-term implementation plan should be developed immediately. However, a more integrated national grid will inevitably introduce additional security threats that we must guard against, from natural disasters and physical attacks to cyber attacks. It's imperative that as we modernize our grid with new technologies, we also develop and embed the solutions that will harden it against threats, just as we have hardened our missile silos against attacks. We also need to be planning, preparing, and exercising and training to manage a wide range of threat scenarios, from natural disasters and physical attacks to cyber attacks. And a coordinated response is essential. So we have to ensure increased cooperation at all levels of government and with the private sector to maximize the security and resilience of our critical infrastructure. That leads me to my final thought. I want to underscore here the imperative of building and sustaining partnerships in all that we do. We cannot generate accelerated, sustainable change in our massive energy system without doing the hard work of building broad coalitions. Very early in my career, as Dean Goldsmith noted, I was a young advisor to then Senator Joe Biden, and he showed me that we have to search for common ground, even with colleagues and countries that disagree with us, and that we should focus less on what divides us and more on what unites us. There is no way we can meet our climate goals unless we identify what unites us and build broad coalitions. We must persuade skeptics that the effects of climate change do not discriminate. And we need to work across the political chasms that have grown in this country to build a clean energy future, and one that holds great potential promise for all Americans. To that end, we need to work to bring together the public and private sectors, labor and businesses, NGOs and financial institutions, religious and military leaders, blue states and red states. A good example of this kind of essential partnership is the work I led at DOE to strengthen emergency preparedness and response capabilities by working with the utilities that power the United States. I knew we would need to enhance information and intelligence sharing to keep our critical infrastructure protected against emerging threats. We will need to build on that kind of cooperation going forward with cities and states, regional coalitions, universities, and the private sector. Together, we can work as partners in a national endeavor that recognizes the diversity of our geography, our economy, and the sources of our energy supplies. More broadly, our international allies and partners are crucial to meeting our climate goals. And this is because, like a spreading pandemic, climate change does not recognize borders. So we have a major stake in the choices that other countries make. Geostrategically, this means we need to renew our support to help our allies and partners secure their energy supplies, particularly from sources and suppliers that enhance their sovereignty, security, and clean energy transitions. Closest to home, this means working again with our neighbors in Mexico and Canada, because in some regions our grids are interconnected and interdependent. Obviously, we have some serious work to do to rebuild these partnerships. Our credibility has been badly damaged by the science denial of the current administration, as well as by our abrupt withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement and the cessation of government-to-government climate collaboration. I'm pleased that Andlinger is already strengthening vital international ties through the Rapid Switch Initiative. Led by Princeton, researchers from around the world have been working together to identify viable decarbonization pathways across all sectors of the global economy. This kind of collaborative cross-sector research will undoubtedly help the US advance its own decarbonization roadmap and stimulate clean energy innovation. And we need to bring that innovation power, which is a unique American asset, back to the table. After leading the world to embrace an ambitious climate agenda, we abandoned our leadership role in 2017. And as a result, others, in particular China, have stepped in to fill the void. Today, China is the world's largest investor in and producer of renewable energy. Over 30% of all solar panels and wind turbines are located in China, and it's leading the way in the production of batteries for electric cars and energy storage for power grids. Speaking at the UN General Assembly in September, President Xi announced China's goal of achieving a net zero economy by 2060, a clear sign that it views clean energy innovation as fundamental to its economic competitiveness. However, despite its considerable investments in renewables, China continues to fund fossil fuel development. In 2017, under the auspices of its Belt and Road Initiative, China's two largest policy banks provided as much energy financing to other countries as all the multilateral development banks combined. Most of that went towards coal or other fossil fuel projects. Indeed, China and countries receiving this financing make up almost half of global CO2 emissions. What this means is that America needs to re-engage with the world to offer a meaningful choice to countries that are seeking a cleaner and more secure power generation, transmission, and distribution system. So our energy technology toolkit will be especially important in the developing world, where choices made on behalf of hundreds of millions of people who do not have access to electricity will have profound consequences for our climate goals and for our national security. Let me give you one example. Nuclear power will be an integral element of the clean energy transition. So we have a responsibility to ensure that civil nuclear technologies do not contribute to dangerous proliferation. This is not a priority for other purveyors of nuclear technology, but our own industry has not been competitive recently, and we have lost both market share and influence. When we are the innovators, when we bring technologies to market as Americans, as we have done for decades in the nuclear space, we also have the power to set the norms that promote global security and prevent terrorists from gaining access to nuclear materials. So my own view is that we need to make a deliberate effort to invest in invigorating our domestic nuclear industry, to support their ability to be competitive internationally, and to enable them to innovate and bring better technology solutions to market. We will not be able to lead the world again unless we get our own house in order. This will be a necessary precondition to restoring trust in us as a reliable partner and rebuilding confidence in our global leadership. If a new administration takes a series of bold actions on day one to launch an ambitious national clean energy and climate policy, it would signal our commitment to doing our part, curbing our emissions, and investing our resources in clean energy solutions for ourselves and the world. The climate crisis and its interwoven security implications present a challenge unlike anything we have ever faced as a planet. We need to spearhead an audacious, comprehensive, systematic effort that brings the country together in a way that we haven't seen since the darkest days of World War II. Then, as now, we were late to enter the fight, but we ultimately provided the necessary leadership to win it. And together, we can do so again. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today, and I look forward to our conversation with Dean Goldsmith now.
Thank you so much, Liz, for those wonderful, inspiring, optimistic perspective on what we can do to regain our leadership and mitigate this existential threat that we face as a country and as a planet. I want to remind people to send their questions to the Q&A tab in Zoom. I'm going to start with a couple questions of my own. So you mentioned we need to regain our leadership in innovation. The US has always been the global leader in innovation, and a lot of that has been around fundamental research that we invested in, which we built innovation upon. Research takes time. It doesn't necessarily speed up when you need it to. So how do we address the challenge of moving fast, as you said, because the threat is immediate, while also developing the underlying deep knowledge that we need to innovate in this space?
So I believe we have the capacity to do both at the same time. And I mentioned during my remarks the necessity of investing, for example, in some of the platform technologies that enable innovation. In my view, that's a decadal process to invest, for example, in advanced computing capabilities that will enable us to meet many challenges that we face in healthcare, in national security, in climate, in agriculture. Those are the kinds of basic science investments that we need to make in a sustained way over time. It's not something you do in a burst and then abandon it. You actually have to commit to it and continue to support it year in and year out. And there I would say one of the great strengths I've already mentioned is this national laboratory network in conjunction with our research universities. What we invest in when we invest in the human capabilities in those enterprises and in the also in the facilities that support them is surge capacity for our nation. You don't snap your fingers and create that kind of capability. The capability in your brain, for example, isn't something that happens overnight. It's decades of investment in development, in creating opportunity. And so what I see we must do now is something that will bear fruit over decades to come. That is to invest in that fundamental science, the basic science, which then can become the platform for the applied science that generates solutions. Fortunately, we have done a lot of that over time. So we do have the innovative capability today to meet the challenges that we're facing. And the revolution that's taking place in computing, to which I've alluded, we are working toward, and we are competitive. That edge, that competitive edge is one that is now challenged by others. And one of the things that I believe strongly is that we need to ensure that we stay ahead of that game. And so we have the need, as I've said, to come together in a whole of government, whole of nation effort, also working with allies and partners who have strengths to meet the challenges of our times and prepare us to meet those of the future.
I'm going to ask one more question, then turn to the Q&A. So you mentioned the climate change doesn't respect borders and that we need to establish partnerships in countries that are in a very different place economically, socially, technologically than we are. What do you envision as those partnerships, and how can we bring the world to the table to address this existential threat?
I fortunately had the opportunity to live firsthand what those partnerships are like. And the United States has traditionally been seen as a country that brings solutions to the table. We, because of our innovation ecosystem, have been able to present our allies and partners and even our rivals with solutions that can meet their clean energy needs and their climate goals. And that is because when we innovate successfully, we're first to market, and we come to other countries and show them what is possible. And working collaboratively, because of the relationships we build, we are able to then assist them with doing the technological analysis and engage their private sector in the acquisition of our technology. Or if it's a country that does not have a flourishing private sector, it may involve working with the government. A good example of this is what happened with China during the Obama administration. And there I co-led a presidential trade mission to China, bringing 24 American clean energy companies to China to discuss the opportunity to deploy those technologies into the Chinese market. And what was quite striking was that we visited 3 cities in China where the local leadership were extremely eager to access these solutions, because on the ground they were facing the fierce urgency of now, which is that their cities had become unlivable due to pollution from using too much coal to generate power. So my view is that around the world, if we innovate the solutions and simultaneously walk the walk at home, that is, we have to earn our credibility back, we will be able to rally the world again, to work collaboratively to meet the planet's needs.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have come up. So the first one is, what will Americans need to give up or reduce to ensure success? What shared sacrifice is necessary?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and it harkens to my final words about the World War II period, when Americans did come together and sacrifice a great deal in order to win the World War that we entered. I think that we will need to make individual choices about how we use energy that are conscientious. And when we bring to market the technologies that can meet the needs of consumers at prices that are accessible to consumers. So for example, the development of electric vehicles that become more accessible to a broader population, that will be an attractive choice for American consumers to make. So weaning American consumers off of fossil fuel vehicles will be something that ultimately should be attractive because there will be benefits accrued. At the same time, there will be opportunities that will match the losses. And I think that's an important part of the message that I tried to convey this morning. There will be economic dislocation. There will be communities that will be impacted. We have to consider the more than 1 million people, for example, who work in the oil and gas sector, and think about what we will need to do to enable them to transition to good paying jobs. And we foresee already that, especially given the need to develop carbon capture and sequestration technology and implement it, many of the skill sets that exist in that workforce will be translatable into new jobs if we're able to deploy CCS on the scale that will be required to meet our needs at home and ultimately around the world as well. So I think what is required is a strategic look, a systems level approach, and individuals to feel that they are a part of that transition and that their leadership at the federal, state, and local level is considering the whole dynamic of this move that we need to make collectively toward a clean energy future.
So one of the themes I've seen in a few of the questions relates to, you mentioned climate science denial. And so the question broadly is, what is the role of public opinion and information access and false information towards achieving these technological and political goals that we have?
We have been living in an era that is unprecedented in terms of the way in which disinformation is promulgated. It does remind me, sadly, of what we knew in my youth about the Soviet Union. There, where information was fiercely controlled by the government and truth was not easily accessible. We now have a proliferation of information, but it's not evident when information is true or false unless you do your own homework. And because people have the capacity now to choose the news that fits their views, they may not be challenged to think about whether the news they are selecting is fact-based. And so we each as citizens have a responsibility not only to do our own homework in terms of where we get our facts, but to help those in our circles and in our communities to learn, to listen, to engage in a civil dialogue so that we can bring ourselves back essentially to our senses about the fundamental facts that science demonstrates to us. This is true with respect to the pandemic, and it's true with respect to climate, that the deliberate effort to distort facts in pursuit of political views has enormously dangerous consequences. Indeed, is a life and death matter in both cases. And so for students of Princeton, for the community watching this, for all of us as citizens, Americans and global citizens, we each need to own this and do all that we can to bring ourselves again to a place in which facts matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a strong statement. Almost a good ending one, but we still have another 9 minutes, so I'm not going to end there. Another really great question is, what is the single most or the most group of most promising clean energy technology today? And I would say in the near and maybe medium term.
Well, I said earlier that I thought that it was important for government not to pick technology favorites. I mean, I really do believe in this theory of the case that we need to be we need to do a lot of experimentation, and that there are going to be so many varied needs that we shouldn't just focus on one thing. But I do think that for me right now, the most significant game changer, as I assess what's necessary, is large-scale battery storage, because that could give us the capacity to utilize the non-emitting but variable sources of solar and wind in a more sustained way in our delivery of power to people at home and around the world. And so that's a big technology challenge that we still need to meet. And I would like to see progress made on that as quickly as possible.
So another question is, you mentioned, we want to move people to clean energy vehicles. There's other clean energy that exists today. How do we incentivize the move to clean energy beyond just making it available? There's things like carbon tax, there's rebates, there's other kinds of incentives. Are those the right way to go, or are there other mechanisms that would be more effective?
I think it's a mixture that we need to have in place, and different countries and different regions of our own country will employ different solutions, because we are a federal system where states have their own capacity to set their own goals and their own policies, their own incentives, their own regulations. I mean, as you know, I live in California, which is a very, very forward-leaning state with very aggressive policies, and that has consequences. And we're seeing, and I think California is a very good state to study, seeing the impacts of those decisions and how they do incentivize certain behaviors, and also what the consequences are, and where there are negative consequences, what we need to do to address them. So lessons to be learned. I do believe government can create incentives early, as I noted, for the development of new technologies that may not yet be sustainable by the market, but we have a lot of evidence that in those cases where there is rigorous evaluation of opportunity, early government investment can seed industries. And the best example I have of that is that in the previous administration, there was funding provided to early utility scale solar endeavors. And we invested through the Department of Energy in 5 utility scale solar projects. And that proved out its concept. And now the private sector has taken over, and there are more than, at my last count, more than 80 utility scale solar projects in this country, all funded by the private sector, all making money and doing well. So that's the one of the big incentives I see. It's to find opportunities where we can drive innovation and create access at a lower cost, ultimately, to the American consumer, to the kinds of clean energy solutions that we need to field as a nation.
So another question, or group of questions, one was about the public fear of nuclear, and I would broaden that to say there's environmental impact of these alternate mechanisms of energy. How do we address the future risks of these alternate mechanisms, as well as the public concerns about energy alternatives that in the past ended up being quite detrimental environmentally? So
these are legitimate concerns. I mean, concerns about nuclear safety are legitimate concerns. And of course, we've experienced in the last decade a catastrophe in Japan at Fukushima, which has showed us what the risks are. In the nuclear space, I would say, interestingly, we have to contrast in our own minds the risk of climate change and its consequences, and the risk of a nuclear disaster. Those are hard to quantify. Both are terrible. What I believe is that with American innovation, with the kind of deployment of American technology that I described, we will advance the prospect of using nuclear power, civil nuclear power, in a safer and more secure way. And that's a very important objective. And that indeed the kind of innovation that's taking place today in nuclear, civil nuclear research focuses on some of those technologies that will ensure greater safety as we more widely deploy nuclear power to meet energy needs in a non-emitting, in a zero emissions fashion. On the broader point you're making, I think you're probably alluding to fracking, among other things. The point is that new technologies can have risks associated with them. And here I'll go back to the previous question that was raised about science and facts. I think it's very important to be open about the facts and what we know and what we don't know, to conduct rigorous studies, to make that information available to the public, not to hide the ball, and where we see consequences, to address them. And so this is something that we're going to have to do going forward, because nothing is going to come free. That is, there will be implications and consequences of decisions that we make, and we're going to have to address them and in some cases mitigate them. My own view is that we have the capability to use these new technologies in ways that do advance our energy needs and also the needs of our communities to be safe environmentally. And indeed, they're likely to be more safe environmentally than they would be were we to continue to support our economy principally through fossil fuels.
Last question, because we only have a few more minutes. You laid out a powerful and compelling plan for a new administration to basically address climate change on day one. What will be the biggest challenges of executing that plan?
Well, there'll be many, many challenges to execution. I would say the most important one that I anticipate is the challenge of building a national coalition. That is, we need to come together, and I spoke to that earlier, that we cannot continue as a nation to be so divided and achieve the goals that we need to achieve for our children and for their children and their children's children. We need to build a national coalition. We need to bring in people who are climate skeptics. We need to bring industry to the table. We need to ensure that those who are invested in the old economy, the economy in which fossil fuels were the dominant source of supply, will find a future for themselves and their families. We need to bring together people who are opposed to nuclear, as we were discussing. We need to bring together all of our citizens in a mission to meet this need. And I believe that requires leadership. That's the only way I can put it. We are going to have to lead differently to come together as a country. This is not the only challenge that we face where that is necessary. But America has met such great challenges before, and we've done it under exigent circumstances. And we've found the will, and we've found the spirit, and we've found the community to achieve those goals. And it seems to me that that is where we must find ourselves again, is coming together around the need to meet this challenge successfully and to come through it in a way that heals our nation and shows us a future that is more promising for our people, and where we can continue to lead the world by setting the example and by bringing the solutions to the table.
Wow, that's a wonderful note to end on. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Liz, for this incredible conversation, for sharing your wisdom, for your incredibly robust and thoughtful and visionary answers to all the questions. We so appreciate your participation, and thank you for your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
My pleasure. And next we have a panel coming up, so I encourage all the attendees to stay for this important panel on energy resilience. Thank you so much, Liz.
Yes, that's right. A huge thanks to our esteemed keynote speaker, Liz SherwoodRandall, for really an incredibly insightful talk. In your comments about the service of sustainability, you made a critical case for an integrated energy, climate, and security agenda, and you laid out what I found to be an inspiring path for our transition into a decarbonized future.